And you're on.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending the March 2021 WAMA. Today we have three amazing classes, and the first of which is the Executing the Cadet Physical Fitness Program, hosted by Cadet Captain Misa McKenna and Cadet First Lieutenant Jensino Jantz. So without further ado, I will hand the meeting over to Cadet Captain Misa McKenna and her team for their class presentation.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm going to share my screen very quick. All right, is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm seeing some thumbs up. So first of all, I want to welcome everyone to the Executing the Physical Fitness Program presentation for this WAMA. I am very glad that everyone is here. It's going to be instructed by me, Cadet Captain Misa McKenna, and also Cadet First Lieutenant Jensino Jantz. And first I want to introduce myself. I'm Cadet Captain Misa McKenna. I've been in Civil Air Patrol for 3 years now. I'm the cadet commander of 21st Fairchild Composite Squadron, and I see a couple of my cadets here in that class from my squadron, so that's great to see. And the main thing that I love to do in Civil Air Patrol is staff encampments. I just love the purpose of encampment and how it affects cadets in our program. And yeah, so I'm going to hand it off to an introduction of Lieutenant Jantz.
All right, thank you, ma'am. So today, I'd like to thank you guys all again for joining our meeting and our presentation. It's some very great material that we're going to be giving you guys, and hopefully it's helpful. Just kind of a short introduction of myself. Again, my name is Cadet First Lieutenant Jensino Jantz. I've been in Civil Air Patrol for about 4.5 years now, so kind of a long time, but with that comes experience and a lot of excitement within Civil Air Patrol. One of the main things I like to do is aerospace, so anything hands-on with aircraft or flying, that's all me for Civil Air Patrol. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and move on to the presentation, and hope you guys enjoy.
One last thing before we start is I want to remind everyone to, if you can, please take notes. This is going to be a pretty lengthy presentation with a lot of information, so it'd be great if you all could take notes. And finally, if you have any questions, make sure to wait and ask until we ask for questions, because we will be having segments for that. All right. So a quick overview of our presentation. We're going to overview how to implement the physical fitness program, expectations of a first sergeant, leading PT in person and virtually, PT formations and calling stretches, the proper execution of the CPFT, which is the fitness test, and setting fitness goals. And finally, we're going to go over some fitness activities. Here's some resources that we have been using for our presentation, and I'm going to explain a little bit further at the end of our presentation what's all going to be included, so you don't need to be taking notes right now on that. We'll be having another slide. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is implementing the program. There's 6 simple steps, and you don't have to follow this to the T, but it's a good guideline to follow. The first one is setting realistic goals for your unit based on cadets' individual needs. So I'm going to use an example of running. Running is on the PT test, and a realistic goal for the unit is to pass the running portion of the CPFT, the Cadet Physical Fitness Program or test. Then the second point is determine training objectives that are specific and measurable. So for example, a 13-year-old male has to run a 9:46 mile time. So a training objective is to reach that time of 9:46. And that's specific, and it's also measurable because you can time it. And number 3 is select activities and lessons that meet objectives. So some activities could be playing tag that really gets your aerobic capacity going so you can have a better time running. Number 4 is watch each cadet and correct improper techniques, offer alternate techniques if needed. So let's say a cadet is running and they're sprinting the first half of the mile, and then they're completely tired by the second half. So to correct that, you can tell that cadet, hey, you can pace yourself and you'll be able to run longer at a more consistent time. Number 5 is create a training environment where cadets are encouraged to perform at their full potential. So you really want to create an environment of support and telling your cadets that you can do this and will work together to accomplish your goals. And then lastly is just adding some motivation. So that could be adding cadences, motivational checks, or battle cries. This gets the cadets ready to exercise. And now we're going to transition to talking about the first sergeant. So Lieutenant Jantz can take over.
All right, thank you, ma'am. So within this section of the presentation, we're going to kind of go over the brief subject of the first sergeant and their role in the actual squadron themselves and how they tie into leading the PT environment. So whether that be the CPFT or any other PT activity that they would like to introduce and lead, basically. So with that being said, we'll be going on to the expectations of the first sergeant. So I'd like to point out this quote right here on the top right. So this is by General Patton. So plans must be simple and flexible. They must also be made by the people who execute them. So basically this ties into what we're talking about, the expectation of the first sergeant. So the first sergeant is viewed by people from different points. So let's say you have the basic cadets, you have cadet airmen to cadet senior airmen. And these are the people who look up to the first sergeant as an experienced leader, a confident cadet, a senior NCO to the first sergeant, somebody that they can look up to, and basically kind of shows that experience and that well-known adversity and their ability to train and mentor other cadets. And then for the senior NCO's perspective, they're the mentor to themselves, the trainer, they're the connection between them and the officers. So whether that be in a PT exercise and then the first sergeant, instead of having just airmen work out by themselves and then the officers work out, we kind of have the first sergeant mix them together and train together. And then the officer's point of view of the first sergeant. So they're the bridge between the flights / the squadron and the executive staff. So basically there's a communication between those in the higher level and those at lower level. And this kind of ties into how important it is for the first sergeant and the reason why it's important for them to be in the PT subject. PT is something that involves the entire squadron, not just sections. So within being the first sergeant, you want to make sure everybody's included and make sure everybody's getting equal training or equal experience. That way nobody's left out. So I have a question for you guys. With this presentation, I'll warn you in the future, we'll be asking a lot of questions. Asking questions will be helping you guys better understand what we're trying to give to you and grasp whether or not we need to simplify it down or teach you more complex things. But I'm going to have you guys answer this question. I will call on people if nobody would like to answer. So why do you guys think the first sergeant is an important role in the squadron? And this is something personal. So why do you guys personally think the first sergeant is an important role within the squadron? I have a nice list here. Yes.
The first sergeant generally knows the cadets' abilities on a personal level because their promotion is dependent upon what their level of achievement in any given grade is. And the first sergeants are the ones who talk directly with the flight sergeants and have a good understanding of where each cadet is, because the officers are not necessarily quite linked to individuals. I hope I'm making sense.
Yes, exactly. It does make sense. And then just to kind of rephrase what you said, that is actually perfect. Thank you. So the first sergeant, the reason why they're important is because they're the link between the officers and the cadets. They're basically the ones who understand and keep track of those who have disabilities when doing PT tests or simply, have trouble doing drill, whatnot, so on and so forth. And basically they're the one that bridges the connection between the officers or even the senior members in that point, just to make sure communication gets through. So I'm going to ask you guys another question before we move on. So how does this role affect the capacity of a squadron's activity? So how does the first sergeant's role affect how squadrons are active or how active they are? And then for those of you who like, you can do this raise hand feature on the reactions. That way you guys I can see a little bit better on who would like to answer, but anybody? All right, well, I'll let you off with this question, but in the future ones, I like to try to see some try to answer the question. So how does this role affect the capacity for squadron activity? Myself, from personal experience, the first sergeant is ultimately the one who directs and guides. Without a director or guide, basically you're just kind of going in a tangent, you're going whatever. So the first sergeant is the one who manipulates the squadron to do what the squadron commander wants them to do. So for an example, in a PT, you want them to go run in a squadron formation. Well, the first sergeant tells the flight sergeants to do this and do that to move them along. And then basically just kind of a chain reaction to allow them to do what the squadron commander wants to do. Yes, Colonel Maxwell.
Maybe we could change that word to motivate instead of manipulate.
Yes, ma'am.
I think that's a good way to do it. The first sergeant has to be a huge motivator, and you have the same results at the end, but just think about it a little bit differently.
Yes, ma'am.
Sure.
Can I throw something in?
Yep.
The first sergeant knows where everybody is and what their capacity capabilities are. Training plans are dependent on where that squadron's at so that they can then move forward.
Yes, excellent. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Colonel Maxwell, for that correction. I was thinking more of the side of drill and manipulating the ability to move around, but yes, thank you. So with that being said, we want to move on to the next slide. So this is the actual expectations themselves of the first sergeant. So this is what kind of like a general overview of what they expect the first sergeants to do. So they should be involved with the squadron's progress, whether setting goals for cadets or their squadron, checking in with cadets. They're basically the ones who make sure they're on level or on plane with the cadets to help them progress or basically move forward or advance. They have to be confident with their actions and instructions. They have to have a sense of pride, basically. So you can't just have a first sergeant that's walking around and second guessing themselves. Otherwise, it kind of shows a loss of confidence or a loss of self-will or motivation in that case. And you just want to make sure you're confident in your actions. And even if you do mess up, you want to make sure you take that responsibility and say, okay, well, I'm going to make the best of it. And then, the first sergeants hold themselves to a higher standard, the broadsword effect. So the broadsword effect is basically if, let's say, you have a cadet that looks up to the first sergeant, and the first sergeant holds themselves to a higher standard than, let's say, one of the officers. The cadets see the first sergeant more, since like broader or more. So then they would be able to basically apply themselves to that standard that the first sergeant has, therefore basically bringing up the motivation of that cadet that's looking up to the first sergeant. What this means is that with holding themselves to a higher standard, it helps other cadets' motivation increase, and their self-will or self-drive to do things also increases. And then first sergeants should have communication. Communication thoroughly is something that is required, especially you can't have a chain link if there's no connection. So basically that includes planning and executing any activities efficiently. So you got to talk to the officers whether or not there's any compromises or any plans that are changed. You need to make sure you can communicate thoroughly. Otherwise, you won't completely understand where the cadets are or where the officers are. And then finally, the expectation of a first sergeant is that they must have motivation. That is probably the most key point or the basically basis of the structure within a first sergeant. So as simple as this, no one will do it if you don't want to do it yourself. So they basically see you in a higher position not wanting to do it. So then that makes her kind of sends it down the line saying, why should I do this? I'm going to move on.
To add on to the communicating thoroughly with the first sergeant, a lot of the time the cadet commander or the cadet deputy commander will ask them to do something when plans change suddenly. So the first sergeant's very important to get that information out quickly and efficiently so everyone knows what's going on.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that. So we're going to be going into leading PT as a first sergeant. So there are 5 specific pieces to help you lead PT and the CPFT in general. So the first one is plan. You want to make sure you have a plan of action, something you can rely on to help guide you on your path. So whether or not it be setting up an activity in an encampment or setting up an activity for your squadron. So the plan, you want to try to use the 5W and H format. So who, what, where, when, why, and how. So who will it affect, why will it affect that person, where is it going to be positioned, when are we going to have that PT exercise, and then how is it going to be going on. So is there going to be officers involved in it? Is there going to be more cadets or other squadrons involved in it? You want to make sure you kind of think that into a plan as well. You also want to think of restrictions. So in these restrictions that you have in your environment, let's say your parking lot has a lot of curbs, so you won't really be able to do a lot of running. Push-ups may be limited, but you'll be able to do sit and reach based off the curbs. Special events, sometimes plan change, and you want to make sure if you do have a special event, let's say a special guest is coming to your squadron and your PT time is cut short, you want to make sure you have that account so that you can accurately gauge what you want to do for the CPFT or any PT activity you're planning. And then location. So where's the most effective location for your cadets? Well, if you're thinking about doing a CPFT or PT exercise, you don't want them running in wet grass. You know, if you're having them do exercise in wet grass, they get wet, they can have slips, trips, and falls, and you want to make sure you limit that safety. You want to make sure you have as much safety precaution as measures as you can put into it. Again, you don't want them running on gravel. They can slip, they can get an injury. You can get a whole lot of injuries based off that. You want to make sure your location is most effective for your cadets. So like going to a school track for them running, that's ultimately pretty safe. And if it's clear, then you won't have much problem. Motivators, you want to know your cadets. So what gets them going? Whether that be ice cream after a PT exercise, you know, a reward that gets them going, or whether it be, you know, motivating them, what, you know, like hoorah stances, or basically motivation chants. So motivated, downright dedicated, stuff like that. You want to make sure you say some chants like that. It gets them pumped up and gets them ready to go. And then you want to set up some goals. So basically this kind of sums up the previous keys. With this, you want to make sure this all goes towards a specific goal. So planning, location, motivators, they all go towards a specific goal. So what cadets do with their dreams? So SMART goals is something you should really look for. So let's say you have a cadet who's running a mile. They want to make a efficient time mile, and they're trying to set up a goal where they're getting faster every month or so. And their first mile time is a 9:50. Well, they want to eventually improve to a 6:25 or something like that. So let's say a SMART goal you can set up is it's timely, it's accurate, it's measurable. And basically what you want to do is you want to incrementally get faster and faster. And you just want to make it reliable so that cadets can go back onto it and achieve it. So the reward and accomplishments. So what can you provide to help the cadets motivate and dedicate themselves to completing or attempting the CPFT/the PT program? So what can you give to your cadets that will motivate them to do what they want to do? So for an example, in my old squadron in Texas Wing, Thunderbird Composite Squadron, every time we would do a PT exercise and we finished a CPFT or a PT activity, we would go to Chick-fil-A afterwards to help celebrate any accomplishments that we've made or anything else. And that's just something our first sergeant did to help motivate ourselves and look forward to that thing. If the cadets aren't looking forward to something, they ultimately won't be really motivated to do something else. Again, motivation is key within the first sergeant and the CPFT program. And then that brings us to this last question that we have with this slide and this topic. So what else can you bring to brighten or expand the experience? So what do you guys think you can bring, whether that be any activity or something that you have personally that you think would brighten up everybody else's experience? So basically this question is asking, what can you bring to help them? Yes, Second Lieutenant Tina, I think. Go ahead. Go ahead, Second Lieutenant.
Lieutenant Sigma, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so one of the things that could help to serve as a motivator for cadets is for senior members to also be involved with doing the actual physical activities. So getting involved with run alongside the cadets, show that it's not just a cadet program, it's a whole life everybody program. And in addition, put together an appropriate musical track that can serve as, motivation for just background, pump up the blood kind of a thing.
Yes, exactly. So basically bring your own ideas to help brighten their experience, help them make it more of a fun activity or something that motivates them. Thank you. So yeah, exactly. I like that musical track idea. So one song I can think of is The Final Countdown. Yes, so Cadet Senior Airman, please forgive me if I say your name wrong. So, let me just look at this again in the chat. Steven, something like that. Sorry about that. So you can bring fun exercise challenges. Yeah, so an example would be push-up challenge. So every time you have a CPFT or PT program, you do a push-up program or push-up challenge. Everybody does as many push-ups as they can in 2 minutes, and then you add all those scores together, and then you try to beat that next time. Something like that. That's awesome. Thank you, everybody. I'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. So here's a little practice that I come up with. This is kind of thinking ahead in time and kind of a visualization for being a first sergeant. So the scenario I'm going to be giving you guys are going to use this scenario to help answer the questions below. So you are leading a squadron of 30 cadets. So there's 3 flights with 10 cadets each. So you have 10 cadets in Alpha flight, 10 cadets in Bravo flight, 10 cadets in Charlie flight. And you have a staging area can fit 2 squadrons, and it's located in a church parking lot. So here's your squadron size, and you have this much room to work with. That's basically all it's saying. So you have 2 squadrons as far as you have 1 squadron, you're working with this much room, and you're located in a church parking lot. So I'm going to be going through these questions, and I'd like you guys to answer as much as you can, but I'll be giving you guys about like a minute or so to kind of look over the scenario. If you have any questions, please ask me. But you're going to look over the scenario and then try to look at the questions and say, okay, well, what can I do for that? And then I'll give you guys a minute to think, and then we'll go over it as a group together. Okay, time's up. I think you guys had enough time, maybe. Okay, so we're gonna ask a couple of these questions and hopefully you guys will be able to answer them. So what type of PT exercises might you guys be able to do? So let's see. I'm gonna pull up the chat and see if I can look at, or actually, let me see. I might be calling on some people, but does anybody like to volunteer first before I call into some people? Yes. So Cadet Airman First Class, I believe. So you can do exercises that are in place. Exactly. So the push-ups, sit-ups, sit and reach, and any stretching exercises, especially since you're very limited with your space. And running a mile might not be the best option without accurately gauging of whether or not it's a mile. I heard somebody unmute, but I don't know if they're answering the question. And then the second question. So can you effectively complete the CPFT? So I would like anybody can answer this. What do you guys think? Can you effectively complete the CPFT?
Yes, you can. We had this exact scenario with our squadron for years, and we simply measured the parking lot so that we could get in a mile. And when we'd put up safety cones and everything and monitor traffic, it was in the evening. Nobody was coming except at the end of the meeting anyway. But we were able to accomplish that at our meeting space.
Awesome. Yes, you can. And another way of thinking of it is like, not only measuring the mile, let's say going back and forth in laps, but you can also do the second option that CPFT offers, which is the pacer. So the brief kind of overview of the pacer is basically you have 20 meters, so 60 feet from one line to the other, and progressively gets faster and faster as the cadets go from one side to the other.
Right. At the time, we didn't have that option.
Yes, ma'am. But yeah, that is another way to think of it. And measuring and basically compromising and make sure you get that measurement is why you can effectively do it. So, is there any safety concerns with this scenario? So all those safety officers out there, or safety personnel that like to call themselves a safety officer. Is any concerns that you guys have with this scenario? Anybody like to volunteer? Yes, possible traffic. Yes, you need to be careful about any vehicles that are coming around, curbs and parked vehicles. Yes, exactly. Tripping in the parking lot while running. Yes, this is awesome, everybody. There's a lot of safety concerns with this as well. Something you might also want to address is possible gravel, loose gravel. So if you're running, the parking lot may not be in the best shape, and you have the possibility of slips, trips, and falls. So yes, thank you, everybody. And is there any additional subjects to cover? You want to make sure that you can put your squadron in a position where they can succeed, not fail. So you want to make sure you can effectively, for an example, put your squadrons in a C-shaped formation so that they can all look at the first sergeant and do the exercises properly. And you want to make sure they're out of the way for any vehicles or cross traffic. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions on this scenario? I know it was kind of a little weird. This is a little bit different, but does anybody have any questions on this scenario or how this ties into CPFT or the PT program? No? Going once, going twice. All right. So we're going to be going on to the leading PT. So both in person and virtually. I'm going to move on. So leading PT in person. So what does an in-person PT look like? And what is your guys' expectation? So what do you guys think? What is it supposed to look like? What do you guys think? Are cadets running? Are they doing it aimlessly? Are they in a professional environment? What do you guys think it should look like? Yes, organized. Awesome. Anybody else? Organized, self-paced, yes. Awesome. And I get one more. As a team, exactly. So in person should look like this is ultimately up to the first sergeant themselves, but ultimately the baseline should be organized, it should be self-paced, and it should be teamwork. You can't really work alone, and the wingman concept comes into everything within we do in civil air patrol, and you want to make sure you can reach excellence. And as the wingman, you can reach excellence easier than you are by yourself. So basically what it looks like is you have the first sergeant directing the flight sergeants, and then the flight sergeants kind of relay the information down, and they all kind of run, for an example, as a squadron and a formation. Basically kind of run as like a kind of a tight formation, but kind of relaxed. That way the cadets can run freely. And what your expectation is. So my expectation is that the cadets are able to understand the first sergeant efficiently and able to do what the first sergeant likes everybody to do. One thing that we're going to go over is what should happen. So you want to make sure you look over the environment. You want to display self-will as a first sergeant. You want to encourage cadets, and you want to stick to the plan. So a basic plan could be like this. So starting formation, so based on your environments, whether that be in a church parking lot, a grass field, a football stadium, whatever it may be that you have access to. You want to make sure you do warm-ups. So stretches, some mile activity. So preferably I'd like to do stretches. That way it kind of gets the cadets warmed up, get their blood moving a little bit, and it prevents them from having cramps or anything like that. Mile activities you might want to do is possibly tag beforehand if it's not the CPFT. The activity itself, so you want to make sure you include hydration. Motivation is key. You want to make sure you're dedicated to actually helping the cadets, and you want to execute the plan. And then of course have a cool down, so flag football, jog, stretches, game, a game with a TLP, whatnot, and that's going to be in our activities section further on. But you want to make sure you kind of include something fun so that the cadets kind of meld the relationship together and understand each other. And then you want to have ending formation, so whether that be just the basic squadron formation or just a kind of quick, hey guys, gaggle over here, and then we'll go and move on. And then anybody any questions on this? All right, we'll go ahead and move on.
Something to add with the stretches is to make sure when you're starting the activity to do dynamic stretches, and then when you're ending the activity, do some static stretches, because dynamic stretches are going to warm everyone up and get ready for the exercise, and then static stretches at the end will cool everyone down.
Thank you. So we're going to go over the second part of leading in person. So with you guys, since many of you, we've all been on virtual format for about a year now. You want to make sure you kind of think of in the future when planning any PT in-person activities. So instruction and safety concerns. This goes towards accommodation. So if there's any cadets with safety injuries or disabilities or anything else that prevents them to participate as well as the other cadets. What formation gives the best advantage for instruction? So like for an example, the C formation. So you're right here and the cadets are in the C formation all looking at you. Or you can have the line formation where it's like this and then they all look at you in the center. You want to make sure you can give that instruction pretty clearly and accurately. That way there's not any miscommunication or cadets kind of tend to mess up or something goes wrong. And then you want to make sure you know your cadets. So what are their limits and how can you help them? For an example, if you have a cadet that's wanting to push themselves on the mile, you can, as a first sergeant, run with them and help push them. If you're faster than they are, you can kind of stay behind and kind of keep a little pace that's slower than yours, but faster than theirs, so that you can help them push their limits. And then you want to think about the environment. So dehydration, heat, clouds, cold, weather, and water. So think of this as you're going in an encampment, for an example, my example. In 2018, Texas Wing Summer Encampment, heat was a very bad problem. So we'd always want to make sure you have cadets have hydration. And this is something you can turn into a motivation standard. So for an example, something that you could say was be hydrate, and then the cadets would say, stay thirsty, my friends, or something like that to kind of get their morale boost and kind of have like a fun laugh with it. But that way they can, have hydration and get their motivation back up. Does anybody have any questions on leading PT in person and basically these safety concerns and instruction concerns? And then go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing that's important with safety is please, please, please observe your cadets when they're exercising. A lot of the time, line staff won't really be paying attention that much because they're focused on the task at hand. But first sergeants and senior members, please observe your cadets and be vigilant and look at what their limits are, because a lot of the time, cadets might push themselves too hard and pass out or not feel well. So please be vigilant and observe your cadets.
Yes, we don't want any cadets passing out on each other. Go ahead and move on. So some PT formations, we're going to be going over this. This is in a scenario where you can't, you don't have as much space. So we're going back to the scenario of the church parking lot. You don't have as much space to do things, and you want to make sure you cadets have enough to do the inline or basically the static or stationary stretches. So the starting formations that you have, you can put, squadron fall in. So this is a basic formation for the squadron. And then you can do open ranks march. And then this basically puts the cadets in an open area to work. So they allow them to have more space to do push-ups, sit-ups, sit and reach, whatnot. And then if you want to give them more space, you can do double arm interval, dress right chest, which is highly recommended. It gives them more space for push-up position or jumping jacks or something more active than what you already have. And then this is an optional part that you can put your cadets in, but this gives more space. So half right / half left face, and the cadets, give them greater margin. So instead of looking in and then there's somebody in front of you and somebody to your left, you're all tilted to the left a little bit and there's nobody in front of you except for like 2 spaces away. So it gives them more space basically. Other formations you want to consider whenever doing PT is running as a squadron. So this is a very motivational thing, especially if you do something called the Indian run. So you basically have all your 4 cadets in a line, you're running, and then you have the cadet in the back try to overpass the person in the front and set the pace. And it's just a little fun activity that you can do to act as a warm-up exercise or a cool-down exercise, depending on what you want to do. And then ending formations, basically you reverse the start formation commands. So instead of half left face, close arm interval, dress right dress, close ranks, arch, and then ball out, so on and so forth. Does anybody have any questions on this baseline formation that we've come up with? No? All right, we want to move on. So calling stretches. So this is, there's a lot of cadets here that are joining and senior members that are joining our class that haven't really got the experience because we had to go virtual due to COVID. So we want to kind of give you guys a refresher of what it sounds like to be leading a exercise, calling the stretches basically. So our example we'll be using is arm across the chest stretch. So you want to make sure your cadets, while in formation, start at the at ease position. So I'll be the first sergeant, and then I'll kind of walk through what the cadets are supposed to say. So the first sergeant myself would say, first exercise of the day is the arm across the chest stretch. And then the cadets that you will be leading will be the arm across the chest stretch, first sergeant, something like that. And then the first sergeant would say, you would explain and demonstrate the movement. So for an example, since we're using arm across chest stretch, I would say, position moves or the exercise is as follows. And then you go like this. So you take your right arm, put it over your left. You take your right arm, put it over your chest, take your left hand and pull back just behind the elbow. That way it kind of stretches your shoulder and your lats, something like that. You want to make sure you explain and demonstrate the movement to cadets, because some cadets ultimately haven't done the movements you'll be exercising in. And then after you explain what the movement is, you'll say, the first sergeant would say, squadron, attend, hut. And then the position of exercise, move. And then the cadets would move, put their arm like this, and then you would count. The cadets would execute the exercise with the given cadence. So before you even say squadron, ted, hut, and then position of exercise, move, you would say this activity would be off of 1,000 cadence. So you would say 1, cadets would say 1,000. You would say 2, cadets would say 1,000. Or you can do the 1, 2, 3, 1 cadence. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, so on like that. And then first sergeant would say after that, after you're done, you would say recover, and the cadets would resume the position at ease. And then you'll say the next exercise of the day is, and then you'll repeat the processes. So I know this is kind of a lot to go through, but this is basically what you'll be doing for the first sergeant whenever you're doing stretching activities. This is a very good baseline to follow. Does anybody have any questions or comments they'd like to add on this?
Yeah, for brand new cadets, you're going to have to explain all of those commands as well.
Yep. So we're going to go through that now. Thank you, ma'am. So the first sergeant, the first exercise of the day is the arm across the chest stretch. So that first line we're looking at. This is the first sergeant in whatever position that you're at. So let's say you're in a squadron formation. And then the first sergeant is up in the front. So you have the squadron right here, and then the first sergeant is right here. Then the first sergeant would say, first exercise of the day is the arm across the chest stretch. Now you as a cadet would say, the arm across the chest stretch, first sergeant. And this is just making sure everybody understands what the stretching movement they'll be doing or executing. Then as the first sergeant would explain and demonstrate the movement. So like this, they would say either eyes or whatever. And yes, so they also might want to explain what you should be feeling in the stretch. Yes, exactly. So for an example, if I'm the first sergeant, I would put my right arm and say, this exercise goes like this, and you should be feeling a stretch in your shoulder and your lats right here, and basically your muscles on the side of your chest. And after that, you'll say squadron, atet, hut, and all the cadets would go to attention within the position, and then they would say, the first sergeant would say, position of exercise, move. That way the cadets can resume this position and move on. And then the cadets execute the exercise with the given cadence. So whatever it be, 1, 1,000, 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 3, 2. So for an example, if I were to say position of exercise, move, the cadets will go like this. Then I'll say, ready, begin, 1, and then you would say 1,000, and I would say 2, and you would say 1,000, or whatever you choose. And then after the cadets execute the exercise, the first sergeant, which I would be acting as, would say, recover, and the cadets go from right here to back to at ease. And the cadets, of course, would resume the position, and then the first sergeant would say, so I would say, next exercise of the day is the whatever the exercise would be. Does anybody have any questions on this? All right, so here's a little practice. This might be a little confusing, but we're going to move you guys into breakout rooms now. This breakout rooms would be, we'll create three breakout rooms. And what you guys want to do is I'll paste the instructions in the chat. But what I want you guys to do is come up with a form of basically kind of like a plan of how to fall into formation. So think about where the cadets will be facing, how much space they'll have, and any type of things you want to have for considerations. Does anybody have any questions before we begin? Because again, I'll be pasting the instructions in each breakout room. All right, you guys will have about 5 minutes, and hopefully you guys can begin. And there you go. Okay, and then those for you in the main chat, I'll be posting this instruction, so Control V. Okay.
And you're on.
Sir, could you close the breakout rooms now?
Done.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right, we should be getting everybody back pretty soon, but that was very interesting. Thank you, everybody, for participating or trying to.
It's about 30 seconds left on the timer.
Yep. And then I'll go over something real quick before we move on slides. For those of you who have already come back into our presentations, anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask me before we move on? All right. Okay. And then I believe we have about 10 seconds left or so. All right, everybody's coming back. Okay, so thank everybody for joining our breakout rooms. I know this is something different that we haven't done before. But ultimately, what I was trying to have you guys do is think about what drill movements you could use and what basically activities or exercises you can do in those drill movements. So for an example, with open range march, you can do push-ups, sit-ups, jumping jacks, something like that, because the cadets are spaced out. With double arm interval, you can do more rigorous activities that require a lot more space. And then half right, half left face, it's optional. And then one thing I was asked to kind of explain is the circle formation. So a lot of times encampments use this to help get the cadets engaged. Whenever you're in the circle, you're all facing towards the person in the center, which would be the first sergeant. What this does is it makes sure that all the cadets look in and they see the first sergeant doing the exercise, so that everybody has a clear view of what the first sergeant's doing. And it also gives a lot of the cadets some space and some the battle buddy feeling. Basically, you have somebody to your right that you're doing the same activity with, you have somebody to your left that you're doing the same activity with, and if they're working harder, makes you work harder, and then it kind of ripples down the same line. Does anybody have any questions on how the circle formation works? No? All right, well, thank you everybody for just participating in that first one. We'll be moving on to leading PT and virtually. So this is a little bit different than in person. There's a lot less understanding that needs to happen for this. So it requires different approaches to execute the best way. When virtually leading, you want to make sure you have a pre-flight checklist. You want to make sure you have any hydration or any materials the cadets need to bring. You want to make sure that you have all the plans, basically your technology is working, so on and so forth. You want to make sure cadets have the appropriate amount of space. Since you're limited by space and people are indoors, you want to make sure that it's stationary exercises. So push-ups, sit-ups, squats, something like that. Materials, so if you have any materials like water or paper, for an example, or possibly like a yoga mat if needed, you want to make sure you put that in there as something you want to make sure you have. Hydration, again, you want to make sure you have hydration, and then replanning if needed. So virtual activities go a little bit different every week, so you want to make sure you adjust it, and if there's anything you want to improve. And then what is the one thing cadets can use to participate in PT activities online? This, for me, I would say, would probably be competitions. even though everybody's separated. I know going back to the push-up competition, everybody does some push-ups, adds them together, and then eventually tries to do something. So recently my squadron's done this. The last push-up activity we did last month in February, we did 235 push-ups in collective edition. And then this month in March, we did in January, we did 230. February, we did about 500 or so in a collective thing. So that was a great improvement. And it's the competition between cadets that helps get those numbers up and everything else. And then what materials and specific exercises and stretches would you perform? I personally perform the arm cross chest stretch, leg stretches, anything that's stationary to help the cadets stretch the specific positions or exercises you'll be doing for the day. Go ahead and move on. So considerations with online PT, you're indoors, you don't have much space. Audio and video language is suggested. So when you're the first sergeant, you want to make sure cadets can hear you properly, they can see you, your entire body, they can know what you're doing. Cadets, you want to make sure you have considerations of cadet safety and health concerns. And then other things to consider with PT at home. Even though you're indoors, you still lose hydration. If you have a cadet that's in the hallway, they may not have as much room. I know that there's some cadets that join as a hallway in their house, and they may not have as much room to do any exercise as everybody else. Does anybody have any questions on leading PT virtually? All right, I'm going to move on. So now we're going to move on to Cadet Captain McKenna. She's going to be talking about CPFT and the program as a whole. So with that being said, ma'am, you now have the floor.
All right, so now we're going to be talking about the cadet physical fitness test. This is a big portion of the PT program. And now we're going to talk about how to properly execute it. So it aligns with the Presidential Youth Fitness Program, and this is what usually schools across America use in their PE classes to do tests. And the CPFT is administered quarterly, and you can make up tests that more frequently so they can be administered frequently if cadets don't pass. And then the fitness test consists of the pacer, 1 mile, curl up, sit up, and sit and reach. So the pacer, like Lieutenant Jantz explained earlier, you go from point A to point B, and each time it gets faster. And I'm sure you've heard the saying, the fitnessgram pacer test is a multi-stage aerobic capacity test. I'm sure a lot of people have heard that saying in their school, and that's what the pacer is. So we're going to talk a little bit about the healthy fitness zone. This is basically what you need, what scores you need to pass. And you must score in the healthy fitness zone to be eligible to promote. But you can be eligible to promote after you reach cadet staff sergeant. So if you're an airman, you don't need to pass the CPFT, you just need to attempt it for your promotion. And then once you hit cadet staff sergeant, the Wright Brothers Award, you do need to score in the healthy fitness zone. And for the fitness test, you need to pass the run plus the other 2 out of 3 events. So you cannot, if you can't pass the sit-ups and you pass the curl up and sit and reach, you're still okay. And then finally, the scores last for 6 months. And this is a chart of all of the data that you need to pass. So my example earlier in the presentation, I said a 13-year-old male needs to run a 9:46 mile. They need to do 21 curl-ups, 12 push-ups, and 8 inches on the sit and reach. So this can also be found on the cadet super chart, where all of the grades are listed and all the requirements. So you can find these numbers there as well. And now we're going to move on to the needs improvement zone. So obviously not everyone might pass the CPFT. So this is what this is for. And if they don't reach the requirements on the run or 2 out of 3 events, they don't earn credit for that quarter of the CPFT. And it's still possible to keep promoting if you met the healthy fitness zone requirements in the last 6 months. So let's say you took a PT test 4 months ago and you passed everything, but this time you did not pass the run. You could still be eligible to promote because you have a valid score on your CPFD for the last 6 months. And commanders and testing officers can retest cadets outside of that quarterly testing at their discretion. And when you are retesting, you don't necessarily need to retake all portions of the test. Cadets, they can only take one or more portions at a time. And I have that little graphic, keep calm and try again. And it's totally okay if cadets don't pass the first time. Like I said, you can retest cadets, so no worries with that. And now we're going to talk about fitness goals and activities that you can do within the program. And now we're going to talk about setting fitness goals. I'm going to ask a question to all of you senior members and cadets. Why do you think setting fitness goals is important in the program? You can either unmute or put it in the chat.
So you have something to achieve to?
Yep. Lieutenant Sycamore.
Without a goal, there is no reasonable expectation of achieving any sort of progress. If you want progress, you have to set a goal to measure against.
Exactly. I think goals are a great way to keep yourself accountable. Like in my room, I have sticky notes of things that I want to accomplish, and looking at those frequently makes me accountable. I'll look in the chat here. All right, Senior Airman Santis Steven, we're gonna go with that. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. They said because it encourages them to work harder and to keep trying. Perfect. Yes, that totally works. And try to exit out here. All right. And some steps for setting fitness goals is to, one, determine the baseline. So I'm going to use an example in my own life. I actually have a cross-country race after this presentation. And my baseline for my goal for my race is to beat my time from my last race from last week. So my time was around 26:40 for a 5K. And then this time, my desired outcome, the second step, is to be faster than that, and also to keep up with the faster people in front of me to the best of my abilities. And then number 3 is to list some strategies needed to achieve the desired outcome. So my strategies the last week has been to train harder, push myself to keep up with the people in front of me, so I'll be faster for this race. And then 4, identify a timeline. A timeline can be, last week I ran this time, this week I'll find out what I run today, but I'll find out that time, and then next week I'll beat that time. So giving yourself a timeline to visualize what all of your times are great. And then number 5 is to commit to the goal. And obviously, if you don't commit to the goal, you're not going to accomplish it, and you're probably not going to feel very good. So motivate yourself, have a positive mindset to commit to your goal. And some other strategies that you can do to set fitness goals is a SMART goals. So specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. And also you can use a fitness log to track all of your times and your progress. Any questions on setting fitness goals? All right, I'll take that as a no. So now we're going to go into a discussion portion. And what I want everyone to do when they go into the breakout rooms is to set a personal fitness goal using the steps discussed in the previous slide. And I'll copy and paste that in the chat so you can all see the steps in the breakout rooms. And you all are only going to be in the breakout rooms for about 3 minutes. So if Colonel Wiggs, you could set up the breakout rooms, that would be great, sir.
All right, did that go? There we go. And I will pause the video at this point. And we all should be back.
Okay, outstanding. So I hope everyone came up with a personal fitness goal using the steps. So does anyone mind sharing what their goal was and all their steps?
I can share mine. So I'm Cadet Airman First Class Gleave. So my goal is when I saw that Captain McKenna put up the chart of based on age, what each of the passing requirements are, I looked at that and knew that right now, as I sit right now, I would not be able to do half of them. So my goal is to be able to at least complete all of them and pass. Because there's no way I could run a 9:34 mile right now. It would take like 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's totally all right. So now you know that you need to start running a little bit and training for that. So
Yeah,
I'm glad.
especially with track starting here in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I need to hurry it up.
Yeah, hopefully those workouts will help you reach those goals. All right, can we get another volunteer to share what their fitness goal was?
One goal of mine was to at least do 20 or so push-ups at some point. So I think one way I could do that is to do a few push-ups every day and gradually add on to that till I can achieve my goal.
That's outstanding. Yeah, that's also my goal. I definitely struggle a little bit more in the push-up area, so I'm going to try to do some push-ups every day, and having that consistent exercise is going to help you get better. All right, we're going to move on to the next slide, which is some fitness activities that you can do within the PT program. So we've got soccer, volleyball, basketball, touch football, ultimate frisbee, some freeze tag and capture the flag. And something with these fitness activities, make sure that you're keeping track of all the safety within this. Within my squadron, with capture the flag, I know there's 2 people here from my squadron. Someone may or may not have ran into a giant tree and tried to get the frisbee. So please just avoid big trees when you're doing these activities, or just any obstacles that are in your way so we don't get any injuries. And some other fitness activities that you can do is obstacle courses and relay races. We did this for one of our PT nights and it was really motivational and it was really fun. And the last one is a station. So this could be you jog from one point to another, and then when you stop, you do, let's say, 1 minute of curl ups. And then you jog again to the next station and do 1 minute wall sits. So a station like that. Any other fitness activities that you all have been doing at your squadrons that you want to mention?
I don't really have any specific fitness activities, but I do know the upside to doing these fitness activities specifically is it helps the team leadership bond. It helps the cadets meld their relationship together and helps them establish more of a courtesy and a relationship of, being a team rather than just having, do this activity and then everybody individually work out. But yeah, I think that the upside doing these activities is the participation.
Yeah, I agree with you, Lieutenant Jans. For example, it can even bond cadet staff and like just normal flight cadets, because you get to see the cadet staff in action and working as a team with cadets as well. So it's great. Now we're going to go into another breakout room really quick. And what I want all of you to do as a team, come up with a unique station circuit and a plan of how to set it up. So in my previous slide, for my stations, I wrote jog, 1 minute curl ups, jog, 1 minute wall sits. Obviously, I want you guys to come up with something different and a plan of how to set that activity up. All right, so Colonel Wiggs, if you could open the breakout rooms, that would be great, sir.
Done. And pausing.
Okay, so can someone volunteer and share what their breakout room team came up with for a unique station circuit?
So our group came up with, we do like 1 minute of jumping jacks and then do like a slalom, I think is how you say it, like agility course. And then at the end you go through that, and then at the end you go as far as you can through the alphabet doing push-ups
Mhm.
and then have like a reward at the end.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Like
Did you-
kind of what we did when we had to run the ammo crates down and back.
Yep. Yeah. So did you guys come up with a plan of how to set that up?
I don't remember if we did or not.
Well, yeah, setting up that activity would be pretty easy because you just lay out all the materials distanced and then you just go to that station. All right, did anyone else come up with a different unique station circuit?
I know with the group that I was in, we talked about doing some exercises that most people wouldn't really like to do. So that'd be like leg lifts, burpees, sometimes push-ups, but anything that we honestly kind of frown upon as far as an activity because we don't like doing it. And because of that fast-paced movement that a relay or a circuit plan would, push you into. So for an example, our circuit plan was 1 minute stretch, then we do burpees, then we jog. We're going to be having it on a track. So we do 1 minute stretch, burpees, jog 100 meters, then we do our push-ups, jog 100 meters, then we do our atomics or leg lifts, and then so on and so forth, and repeat the process. But we were planning on having it at a school field or a track or something like that.
So I like that station circuit because that can be great for squadrons who don't have the resources like dumbbells or other materials that you might need for a circuit. So that's great because you don't have a lot to set up. It's just explaining how to do it. So that's great.
What are burpees?
What, ma'am?
What are burpees?
So burpees are, you start out in the position of a push-up, so then you do a push-up, and then you stand up, you jump, and then you go back to the push-up. It's pretty difficult if you do it for a long amount of time. All right, so we're gonna move on to the conclusion. And we went over the definition and expectations of a first sergeant, leading PT as a first sergeant, how to lead in-person PT, PT formations and calling stretches, how to lead it virtually, how to properly execute the CPFD, going over how to do some fitness goals, and finally, some fitness activities that you can do within the program. Lastly, here's the resources slide that I was talking about. The CAPP 60-55 is the Active Cadet Fitness Guide. And this is where the most information is for the PT program for Civil Air Patrol. A lot of our information in this presentation was pulled from there. And you can find the healthy fitness zone requirements there, the fitness goals, fitness activities. If you ever need ideas for PT, that's a really great guide to go to. The second one is the CAPP 52-18 Cadet Physical Fitness Program. This one you can find when we're talking about how to call stretches. It gives the process of how to do that. And the CAPP 60-33, Cap Drill and Ceremonies, my personal favorite. It explains just how to call PT formations and stretches. Finally, we have the Cadet Staff Handbook, CAPP 60-31. This just explains the first sergeant's roles and responsibilities. So you can always go to that if you need to know what the first sergeant should be doing. Does anyone have any questions before we conclude our class?
For those of you who are interested in having the links for these, I'm trying to get them as we speak. But again, thank you for everybody for their patience.
Wait, I got a question. I'm looking at the pamphlets right now and there is no 60-55. Have they changed the number?
It should still be 60-55.
Well, I'm on the website now in pamphlets and there's a 60-50. Oh, that's
I
it.
think it's the 60-50. Yeah, I had that problem too, and then I just looked it up by name. It's 60-50.
Yeah, okay, there we go.
Okay, it might have just been a typo.
Probably, that's fine.
Thank you for pointing that out though.
No problem.
All right, thank you, Lieutenant and Captain, for a very good presentation. I think you brought up a lot of good points. And tips, tricks of the trade. You can use formations to get the social distancing. I think two key takeaways for me have been we're going to have to take into account most people have been forced into a sedentary lifestyle for the last year. So assessments and setting goals will be important. And the social distancing needs to be taken into consideration as well. So I'm going to open it up for any last questions for the group. And I'm going to pop a quick poll out there for you to fill out if you don't mind. And then we will end for the day. So if there's any additional questions, comments for the instructors, we'd greatly appreciate it.
Good luck at your race, Captain.
Thank you, Airman Gleave. Yeah,
I'll ask you how it goes on Tuesday, how it went.
yeah, I'll tell you. Hopefully it goes good.
And one quick comment, the video for this presentation will be available on, I believe, the Wing YouTube channel. So if you want to see any of the information or any of the presentation, it will be available there.
It will be available there, and then a link if you go to the vWAMA page to the registration and calendar. There will be links there as well. There'll be a different tab to the far right.
Thank you.
I thought it was very inspiring to make PT fun again.
Yes.
I think that's what I'm going to take away to, get the program done, but then start having some more fun doing it in our units.
Yeah, we always play a game after we do the PT part.
I think just one of the I was going to say, I think just one of the challenging pieces is once we are back in person, we're still probably going to be required to do that social distancing and thinking about those different activities that keep social distancing, but are still fun and build that like team spirit, I think is going to be really important. So even drawing on the rest of our cadets to see what kinds of things they think of, they're a great resource.
Perfect.
I was just going to make one other comment too that maybe wasn't mentioned, and that is it's important for in particular, the cadets that are actually working with other cadets, that they are cognizant of limitations that some cadets may have, whether it be a physical disability or a medical condition, asthma or whatever. And so it's important that that these are brought out about as far as the attention to the other senior membership, the senior commander of cadets, this type of thing, because accommodations can be made with that physical requirement list. And so it's just be aware of that, so that we're not pushing some of these cadets that are unable to do certain exercises too.
I do have a question on that. 15 years ago when my daughter was in, she couldn't do 2 of the things, but she could do 3. And she was simply told, just get a waiver. And so I was wondering, has that changed, or is there encouragement to do what you can and skip what you can't? So what is the regulation on waivers?
There are waivers. There's specific levels of waivers. I'd have to go back and refresh. There's temporary all the way up to permanent. And Colonel Maxwell will be a better one to tell me that regarding the impact on the spots on the waivers at that juncture. Within the fitness testing, there can be waivers for individual categories, but I would caution that there probably should be some sort of documentation to support issuing the waivers, and there's specific timelines that they have to be relooked at before It's just not a perpetual waiver unless it's,
Well, okay, in her particular case, she had 2 metal rods in her spine for scoliosis and a documented weakness of her arms and such. So that not being able to do sit-ups and push-ups was permanent, but she could run. So she was just told to get the permanent waiver and not worry about it. And I was just curious about that. I felt like she should have been able to do what she could do. That was just my opinion. So I just was wondering, in a case like that, what do you do?
I think, based on the information you gave me, we also put into account reasonable accommodation. And we have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. I don't have a solid answer for you right here, but based on what I know now and what you just told me, we would have to look. Are there acceptable substitutes for some of the components on a case-by-case basis? And I don't know at what level it would have to be approved, maybe all the way up to national, but it's perfectly reasonable to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
So the waiver would probably be in place so that, but also I would want a doctor's saying, yes, it was okay for her to run, and yes, it was okay for her to, play the Frisbee or whatever, from a corporation, taking care of the corporation as well. But I think it's important for her to do what she could do for the camaraderie of the cadets in the unit.